Good evening. Welcome to Defacto Review, our weekly in-depth analysis on the current news and affairs with our commentator, Mr. Narmat.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
And I'm your host, Namsarat Sindh. You can join in on our conversation on MNB World Facebook page and on Twitter via hashtag Jargal_Defacto. External debt of Mongolia. Is Mongolia ready for digital transformation? Why does the government classify information? The external debts of Mongolia, including both public and private sectors, stood at $29.7 billion as of June 2019. Balance of Payment and External Debts Theoretical and Practical Conference was organized at the initiative of Bank of Mongolia on the occasion of the 95th anniversary of the establishment of banking sector in Mongolia. During the conference, it is announced that the external debts of Mongolia stood at $29.7 billion as of June 2019. So our first question about this is that total amount of Mongolia's external debt was announced to the public, and this during this press conference. So when did the debt really spike upwards, and what caused it? We have actually a graph on that. Could you explain it on that?
Yeah, it's all started back in 2012. When the new coalition government was formed right after the election. And from a modest 10 billion external debt in 2011, it went up to a 17 billion immediately in 2012.
Right.
And mind you, this was the very first kind of experience for a government to raise financing from the private funds and the market.
And who is actually responsible for expending these loans and contributing it to the economy?
Well, it looks like you and I will be responsible for the repayment of the loans,
right?
The ordinary citizens. But as I said, the coalition government back in 2012, they had announced and declared that there will be a sole guarantee of the private of stability. And they needed to boost an economic growth. So there was a very humble rationale behind. But as usual, they really lacked the redistribution strategy and repayment strategy as well. So the large portion of the Chinggis bond went to improving the current infrastructure, road infrastructure across Mongolia, right, and in Ubei. And still, there is lacking information who the Chinggis bond beneficiaries are, so we still cannot, we don't have an access to that kind of information.
So let's take a look at the second graphics about who is actually paid how much to the external debt, and what was the reason for keep taking so much loan? Why?
Well, as I said,
if the first one is not paid back, like there's no point in taking more. So,
I think suddenly, you had $1.5 billion. I think that was no one probably would have believed that they could raise 1.5 billion, and suddenly you have there are tons of money. And then, as I mentioned just a few minutes earlier, we lacked a clear redistribution and repayment strategy. Those loans are meant to create new opportunities, new business opportunities. You need to spend those credits on improving, the big infrastructure projects that will have an influence for the economic growth, like the railway modernization, the energy projects. But they just didn't go that way. That's the problem. And in short, the government, they needed to create a sustainable ecosystem that is able, A, to be efficient, B, and able to repay back the credit.
So after all, we already taken the loan. And do you think the Mongolian government has the capacity to pay it back right now? Well, can we actually pay it back?
Well, our current GDP is around 15 billion as of today.
Right.
And the last year's GDP growth was 7%, 7 to 6%, I think so. And at the current pace, I don't think so. The government somehow will be able. Right now, as of today, no. Right. It's quite challenging.
How long would it take, and what do we need to do? Like how to
support private sector, because after all, the private sector pays the taxes, and
Right.
through the collection of the taxes, the government need to repay the loan back.
And do we have any amount of the loans we taken? Like, is there any left, or is it all
Well,
expended on infrastructure or this?
well, here is, we have Development Bank of Mongolia, who's responsible for financing the big infrastructure projects that the minimum threshold, as far as I recall, it's around 20 billion tugriks, and above they're ready to finance. But in Mongolia, how can you find the big projects that go meet the minimum threshold? It's quite difficult, and that's one instance. And also, and who's responsible for that decision? The Ministry of Economic Development is ceased to exist. Right. And if we look at the Development Bank of Mongolia, and then the portion of the non-performing loans already exceeded 10%. So, and who will be responsible? I reckon that will be our private sectors. I reckon there will be an ordinary taxpayers just like you and I.
So how long would it actually take? What's your take on this? How long would it might take to pay fully repaid back?
No, I have no idea. That's overall what we have managed to raise. It's about 4.2 billion,
Right.
in form of the bonds, one way or another. So in 2021, the first payment that will be around $500 million.
Right.
So there are no clear strategy how to repay back, and that was the main message in the conference.
So is there any solution? As you said, we can support the private sector, and with what money can we support the private sector?
Well, just let the private sector do what we best of doing it.
Right.
After all, if you look at the economic growth over the last 7 to 8 years, this is not the government initiative at all. This is what we, a private sector, on its own risks, they brought the economy. Mm-hmm. They raised the economy. It's not the government, no. Now, it is a private sector who influenced and somehow who managed to bring the economic growth despite all the political odds.
Right. So let's get into our second topic about the Mongolian digital transformation. Supported by the government of Mongolia, the University of Oxford's Blavatnik School of Government, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Access Solutions, LLC, organized the Nomads in the Digital Age Conference in Ulaanbaatar on September 17th. During this conference, a report and policy recommendation of Mongolia in Digital Age project was presented. The event brought together government, businesses, civil society, and international stakeholders to discuss global agenda to use technology for better education and a more inclusive society, and the government was also attended by the Prime Minister of Mongolia, Hurlsukh, and Ulaanbaatar City Mayor, Amar Zakhan. So our first question about this topic is that your report and policy recommendation of Mongolia in Digital Age project was presented, as I said. So why did they conduct this research? And what was the result?
Well, I don't know why they conducted the research. I have no idea, to be honest. But they had declared that Mongolia is ready for digital transformation. Mm-hmm. And the survey, I read the interview of the project manager, and he said they conducted in 4 topics. The survey consisted of the 4 topics, or pillars. The first pillar is readiness of the ICT infrastructure. And when I say ICT infrastructure, that I mean it's hardware, software, services, nationwide availability of the networks. Then they touched upon the human resources, the qualification and experience of the ICT professionals, A, and B, the acumen of ordinary Mongolians, whether they're keen to use and open to use the digital services. The third pillar was the financial services, whether the availability of financial aggregators and venture capitalist funds in order to support startups. And the fourth pillar, the robustness of the current legislative environment to protect investors, venture capitalists, IP, intellectual property enforcement. So those were main topics that they conducted this
Who
survey.
actually initiated this? Mongolian side initiated this, or is there any international organization that?
I
Just
reckon that was, I have no idea who
Right.
initiated, but since this project was funded by Bill and Melinda Foundation, A, and B by the Oxford University,
Right.
probably it was initiated by one of the NGOs here in Mongolia, but definitely not the government. Yeah.
Right. So, how does a nation's digital readiness is assessed and readiness for digital transformation is determined? And the project then concluded that Mongolia is ready for the transformation. So, as you mentioned before, there's 4 pillars, right?
Yeah.
So, Mongolia is qualified for all 4 of them?
Well, I'm an IT professional myself, so
Right.
this is me topic. Yeah, probably
Right.
I can talk for hours if needed, but to be very short. I think yes, we are ready, but ready as far as the basic infrastructure and basic understanding is concerned.
So, there.
There are plenty of room for improvement.
Right.
The first improvement I think we need to understand, especially from the telecom operators, rolling out an infrastructure is very capital intensive project. For instance, in order to roll out 4G network in Hubei plus in 21 provinces, that would require around $30 to $35 million standalone. And every year you need to expand the network in order to meet the traffic because speed is never enough. That's, as an ordinary, we're always bound for having more speed. We need more speed, 10 gigabyte, 20 megabyte, right?
Right.
So, and this is a bottleneck. This is a bottleneck. But if you look at the average revenue per user, it's actually declining for telecom operators in order to sustain the efficient operators. So I see the trend where the revenue is moving to a new business models like platform as a service, service as a service, the content itself. So they're trying to create new profit centers, and through that they're going to finance the network expansion. The second. And this is the most important. I think the areas that we are lacking probably the pillars number 3 and 4, because in order to
those are?
drive the transformation, digital transformation,
Right.
you need people, you need qualified professionals who understand the benefits and is ready to work on the transformation. But it all comes down to the reformation of the current K-12 and higher education system. Otherwise, we are still, lagging behind. We're lagging behind. The new topics, STEAM topics. Improving the methodology for high schools or primary schools, secondary schools. This is quite a necessity. We need to start from the very basics,
Right.
and then if we start from the basics, then we can assure the digital transformation will be efficient. That's the only way. Because right now it's clearly the lack of ICT professionals. And the last thing I would say, the lack of the capital market, especially for startups. I think there are only a few companies like Landeman, Horeman, who has managed to attract through the IPO, local IPO, the big funds. But those are really singular cases. If you look at the broader picture, we see that the capital market is not yet available for Mongolians and for Mongolian startups, because of the pillar number 3, because of the lack of professionals.
Right.
Because of the lack of professionals. Yeah.
So, how does the digital transformation would affect the economy? As you said, that there is Land.mn and other minor businesses that really took off. So, could you tell us about the other experience of other nations and how they managed it, and how will it affect our economy?
I'm a true believer that the digital economy will have potentials in Mongolia, given our geopolitical occasions, right? In a physical business like a mining business, agro-business, you are limited to your physical boundaries. You are limited to your physical boundaries. But in a digital economy, you don't have any boundaries, and that's the beauty of it. And given that, if Mongolia is ranked among one of the smartest people on earth, as far as the IQ is concerned, right, I think we're topping number 4 or 6. So we have the potentials. We have the big potentials, and my favorite case here is the case of the Israel.
Right.
If we look at the Israel right now, it's a tiny country with a population of 8 million, but their GDP is $400 billion. $400 billion. And the main economy, high-tech production. In military, in aviation, communication, telecommunication, hardware, software, pharmaceutical businesses, right? Chemical products, financial services, and it's there.
Right.
Because the digital transformation coming one way or another to every aspect of our daily life.
So, as for the example of Israel, did the government had any special policies approving this one?
Yes, you read the book Startup Nation.
Right.
I highly recommend our viewers to read the book Startup Nation. It's from the very beginning and establishment of the state of Israel, the government of Israel, they continuously supported high-tech businesses. And they started from very small things, like in backdoor garages, they started manufacturing old World War II planes.
Right.
And through that experience, they acquired knowledge and experience in aviation, in space industry. They invested in pharmaceutical business because pharmaceutical business is all about brains. They nourished that culture. So, for Mongolians, it's a question right now, it's to be or not to be. Whether Mongolia remain as a Mongolia, or whether, we are moving towards a new and brighter Mongolia. And the only way is a digital transformation because it makes life much easier. And within the parliament period of 4 years, we can implement, and then yet we can see the results. That's the best part.
So in case of Mongolia, do we have any special policies that approving this one?
Well, there is a so-called an ICTPA agency who supposedly must be in charge of all ICT-related matters, strategy, but I doubt. Yeah,
Great.
I doubt.
So they concluded that we can. And when will this happen?
Digital transformation?
Yes.
Well, I reckon in our lifetime.
Okay.
It's already happening. It's already happening. Look at the number of the smartphone users here in Mongolia.
Right.
It's already topped 2 million for the country of 3.2.
Yeah.
Right. I think the mobile phone, the mobile application banking penetration is about 60 to 70%. So we already,
I've started the process.
It's already started, but yet, the decision makers, they still don't understand.
Right. Okay, so thank you for that. Let's get into our third topic about the classified information. The amount of government classified information is increasing, and access to information is an essential part of preventing government officials from abusing their power and any attempt to overthrowing a democracy. However, Mongolian people have limited access to information, and government organizations, especially state-owned enterprises, are very secretive about their information. So our first question about this is that we are talking about right to access information. Mm-hmm. And what kind of problems does the people face to practice their right to access information? And for example, are you as a citizen getting the information you want from any company, the state-owned companies, or from the government, maybe official sites?
Not at all. No. I think, we always are refused an access to our public information, right? Because the information is always classified. We're not asking for a classified information access, so to speak. We're asking an access to our public information, and once you have an access to that, the public institutions, as an ordinary citizens, we are acting as a watchdog. So, but we are refused to do so. But I see some improvements, especially at the National Statistical Office. Right. They did a splendid job over the course of the last 2 years. I can see they providing a lot of information through the media, social media about the statistical changes. So I see the improvements. But the rest government institution, it's quite difficult to have an access to the information.
Right. So the government classifies certain information, certain sensitive information that might affect the national security, and we have graphics on that. But the researchers say that this is a very broad term, so they classify information based on their perspective alone. Yep. Is this true, and how can we fix it? For example, you can see that the increase of classified information is much more than compared to 1995. It's almost comical.
Yeah, it is a comical. If you look at the statistics from 1905 to 2004, only 22 classified information were, but in 2019 it already hit the 565.
Right.
So obviously it shows that it is misused. Government under the so-called the confidentiality or the information, they're trying to hide the information. So this is obvious. The numbers don't lie.
Right.
Numbers don't lie, right? But government, they should understand on a very simple, basic principle or philosophy. The more you open, the less problem you will face.
Right.
So small lie always creates another bigger lie. And after a certain period of time, you are caught in a lie.
Right.
This is what is happening to our government. They're trying to restrict and hide the information because for them, it's beneficial. Right? Because that information can be misused, misread, and used for the subjective and political purposes. That's why, they're really keen on blocking all access to the information. Right?
Right.
But I would like to label whoever blocks that access, I would call it a digital criminal, because we're living in an era of open information. One way or another, the public institution, they can get an access. We did a survey back in 3 years ago when I used to work for Microsoft. 95% of the government computers were using an illegal software.
Right, yeah.
And if you see nowadays, you see a lot of government officials, they're using their personal emails
to contact with other.
Yeah. So that's clearly says, the government, they have to do something regarding the information, regarding the openness, regarding the transparency.
So there is on top of the classified information increasing, there is a problem that there are more and more false information. So there are even reports about that they are using false information to affect the election.
Yeah.
So, and we have an election next year, and would they use it? And how can we stop it? How can we limit the spread of false information? And how can we determine which one is false?
Well, I can say that in the light of the upcoming election, the so-called the political technologies for misspreading the fake or information will be used extensively. Well, it's for sure. But how we can solve it?
Right.
And when government is blocking an access to the public information, open information, and when we don't have an information, there is a vacuum that needs to be filled in, right? That needs to be filled in, and that vacuum is actually filled by the fake or news or information. That's how you meddle with the public opinion. That's how you meddle. So, how we can fight it? Very simple. It is, we need to establish a sound e-government platform. And I know there are funds available from the Asian Development Bank, from World Bank, in order to finance the government transformation, e-government transformation. I know that. It's a fact. It's a proven fact. But someone is blocking it. And that someone who is blocking it, I call it a digital criminal.
Right. So who has access to this information? Let's take a look at the graph again. So there is levels of classified information. There is top secret one, there is secret one, and who decides which one goes to which level of classified information, and who has access to that?
Well, I'm sure, we're not trying to get an access to very secretive or confidential information that is regarded as a national security for sure, right? So there is an established system for that. But for classifying the public and open information, but no one yet knows who's classifying it. Right? And what are the procedures and the requirements for classifying such information? What is regarded as a confidential information, classified information? No one yet knows, and it is a government job to educate and provide that kind of information to the public and the institutions. So we don't ask, those questions again and again, over and over.
So we have to take action about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Unfortunately, that is all the time we had for today. We will see you next week with more topics about this one.
Okay,
Have a nice evening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Hope you did enjoy our conversation.